Not here, you don't. True power looks like this. Stone monster. Stick that up your ass.
Rick and Morty fans once caused a riot at McDonald's over a dipping sauce. Sounds wild, right? But that's just one of the many controversies surrounding this show. In this video, we're taking you through every major Rick and Morty scandal. From that infamous sauce incident to the recent removal of Justin Roiland, we're covering it all. This McDonald's fiasco really shows how intense the fandom can get, and trust me, it gets even crazier. So grab your portal gun and get ready, because we're about to dive into some pretty swifty stuff. Don't touch that dial, because you won't believe what comes next. So, Rick and Morty, how exactly did this weird little show about a grandpa and his grandson become such a big deal? Let's rewind to 2013 when it all began. The show debuts, and at first, not many people even notice it. It's just another Adult Swim cartoon, right? Wrong. Something strange starts happening. The show begins picking up steam. It's like watching a runaway interdimensional comet leaving a trail of Meeseeks boxes and plumbuses in its wake. Before you know it, everyone in their alternate reality selves are talking about Rick and Morty. The fan base grows faster than Rick can down a flask of space booze. By the time season 3 rolls around, Rick and Morty becomes a cultural force to be reckoned with. People are getting swifty all over the place, and catchphrases like "wooba looba dub dub" are popping up in the most unexpected corners of the internet. But here's where things start getting tricky. The bigger the fan base gets, the more, let's say, passionate it becomes. And by passionate, I mean sometimes a little too intense for their own good. Remember the whole high IQ meme? Yeah, that's where the problems really start to show up. You know the one I'm talking about, the idea that you need to be some kind of genius to truly appreciate Rick and Morty's humor. It started as a joke, but then some fans took it way too seriously. Suddenly, you've got people unironically claiming that only the smartest of the smart can truly understand the deep philosophical implications of Mr. Poopy Butthole's character arc. This is where the fan base starts to develop a bit of a reputation. On one hand, you've got these incredibly creative, passionate fans making amazing art, cosplays, and theories. But on the other hand, you've got folks who seem to think that watching Rick and Morty makes them the next Stephen Hawking. The show's rapid rise created a fan base that was passionate, yes, but also increasingly problematic. You start seeing gatekeeping behavior, with some fans deciding they get to choose who's a real fan and who isn't. Online forums become battlegrounds of increasingly obscure Rick and Morty trivia, used to prove who's the most dedicated fan. Then there's the issue of fans taking the show's nihilistic themes a bit too much to heart. Rick's nothing matters philosophy is meant to be a flawed worldview that often gets him in trouble, but some fans start wearing it like a badge of honor, using it as an excuse for all sorts of questionable behavior. The show's popularity also leads to an explosion of merchandise. Suddenly, you can't walk into a hot topic without being bombarded by Rick and Morty t-shirts, Funko Pops, and yes, even pickle-shaped products. The commercialization of the show starts to create tension within the fan base. Some embrace it, while others feel like their niche, cult favorite, is being sold out to the masses. By the time season 3 hits, Rick and Morty isn't just a show anymore. It's a cultural phenomenon, complete with all the baggage that comes with that status. Fan theories are dissected with the intensity of academic papers. Every new episode becomes a major event, analyzed and reanalyzed for days afterward. Alright, so season 3 of Rick and Morty hits, and there's this one episode that's about to turn the fandom upside down. You might have heard of it, Pickle Rick. Yeah, that's the one where Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, it was, but it was also so much more. This episode really hits different. It's not just a wacky adventure, it's a deep dive into Rick's character. We see him go to absurd lengths to avoid dealing with his emotions and family problems. It's funny, sure, but it's also kind of sad when you think about it. The fans, they went absolutely nuts for this episode. "I'm Pickle Rick" became the new catchphrase everyone was shouting. You couldn't go online without seeing Pickle Rick memes everywhere. T-shirts, cosplay, fan art. Pickle Rick was suddenly the face of Rick and Morty. But here's where things get tricky. This episode became a sort of dividing line in the fandom. On one side, you had the fans who saw the deeper meaning behind the pickle shenanigans. They appreciated the commentary on emotional avoidance and the dysfunctional family dynamics. These fans were diving deep into discussions about the symbolism and the psychology behind Rick's actions. On the other side, you had the fans who were just there for the surface level humor. They thought Pickle Rick was hilarious because, well, he's a pickle who fights rats. riots. And that's fine, but it led to some tension in the fandom. You started seeing a lot of gatekeeping, with some fans claiming that if you didn't get the deeper meaning of Pickle Rick, you weren't a true fan. This divide in the fan base wasn't exactly new, but Pickle Rick really brought it to the forefront. It became a sort of litmus test for how people viewed the show. Were you watching for the crazy sci-fi adventures and silly humor, or were you more into the dark philosophical undertones? The thing is, Rick and Morty has always been a show that operates on multiple levels. It's got the surface level humor that's easy to enjoy, but it's also got these deeper themes running through it. Pickle Rick just happened to be the perfect example of this dual nature. And let's not forget about the therapy scenes in this episode. While Rick's off on his pickle adventure, we get some really insightful moments with the rest of the family. Dr. Wong, the therapist, delivers this fantastic monologue about how people often choose to take on unnecessary hardships rather than deal with their actual problems. The Pickle Rick episode really showcases what Rick and Morty does best. It takes this absurd concept and uses it to explore some pretty heavy themes. It's silly and profound at the same time, which is kind of the show's whole deal. But here's the thing, as much as Pickle Rick represents a creative high point for the show, it also marks the beginning of some serious growing pains for the fandom. The popularity of the show was exploding, and with that came a whole host of new issues. The divide between different types of fans was growing, and things were about to get a lot more complicated. So remember that throwaway gag about Szechuan sauce in the season 3 premiere? Well, it turned into a saga that exposed some of the worst aspects of the Rick and Morty fandom. Let's dive into the sauce incident that nearly brought down a fast food empire. It all started innocently enough. In the episode, Rick rants about a discontinued McDonald's Szechuan sauce from 1998. Just a silly moment, right? But oh boy, did the fans latch on to it. Suddenly, everyone wanted to try this sauce. It became the holy grail of dipping sauces. People were making their own versions at home and losing their minds over a nugget sauce that hadn't existed for almost 20 years. McDonald's saw a marketing opportunity and decided to capitalize on it. They announced they'd be bringing back the Szechuan sauce for one day only, October 7th, 2017. Limited quantities. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. Fans lined up for hours outside McDonald's restaurants. Some people camped out overnight. But McDonald's severely underestimated the demand. Supplies ran out in minutes at most locations. That's when things got ugly. We're talking grown adults throwing tantrums in fast food parking lots. People were screaming at minimum wage workers, demanding their sauce. There were reports of fans jumping on counters, chanting, "We want sauce," like they were at some kind of condiment-themed protest. In some places, police had to be called to deal with the chaos. Actual riots were breaking out over a dipping sauce from a cartoon. One fan in Los Angeles even traded their car for a packet of the sauce. A whole car for a tiny packet of sauce that probably cost McDonald's pennies to produce. The incident quickly went viral, but not in a good way. It became a symbol of everything wrong with toxic fan culture. Here were supposedly intelligent fans of a smart satirical show, losing their minds over a marketing gimmick. It exposed a level of entitlement in the fandom that was frankly disturbing. These fans felt they deserved the sauce, that McDonald's owed it to them somehow. When they couldn't get it, they lashed out like toddlers who'd been denied a toy. The whole fiasco also highlighted the dangers of corporations trying to capitalize on fan culture without fully understanding it. McDonald's clearly didn't realize what they were getting into. McDonald's, trying to save face, promised to bring the sauce back in larger quantities later. They even issued an apology, acknowledging they didn't anticipate the crowds and passion shown by fans. When the sauce did come back, the response was underwhelming. Some fans complained that it didn't taste as good as they imagined. Others had moved on to the next obsession. As for the creators of Rick and Morty, their response to all this madness was complicated. They seemed both amused and uncomfortable with the chaos they'd inadvertently caused. So the fans were going wild over sauce packets. But what about the guys actually making the show? Turns out Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon were stirring up their own brand of chaos behind the scenes. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. It started with some old tweets resurfacing. You know how it goes. Someone digs up something you said years ago, and suddenly everyone's got an opinion. But these weren't just your average embarrassing posts. We're talking some seriously questionable stuff that had fans wondering if they really knew the guys behind their favorite cartoon. As this was going down, people started to notice something weird. The way Roiland and Harmon were acting, it was like they were living out their own twisted version of the show, not in a cool sci-fi adventure way, but more like they took all the wrong lessons from Rick's character. It put fans in a tough spot. How do you keep enjoying a show when the creators are acting like this? Things really went south when Justin Roiland got into some serious legal trouble. I'm talking criminal charges here. When the news broke, fans were shocked. Social media exploded with people trying to process what was happening. Some defended Roiland, others felt betrayed, and a lot of folks were just confused and upset. Adult Swim didn't waste any time. They cut ties with Roiland faster than Rick can down a flask of space booze. This was huge. Roiland wasn't just a creator. He was the voice of both Rick and Morty. How do you keep a show going when you've lost one of its key voices? It's like trying to make a portal gun without any portal fluid. The network said the show would go on, but fans were skeptical. How could Rick and Morty still be Rick and Morty without, well, Rick and Morty? It was a weird situation where the show about infinite possibilities suddenly felt very limited. All of this forced fans to take a hard look at what they were really supporting. It's one thing to laugh at fictional characters doing crazy stuff on screen, but it's another to see the people behind those characters acting out in real life. Suddenly, all those jokes about nihilism and consequences didn't seem so funny anymore. It was like watching a real-life episode of Rick and Morty, but without the reset button at the end. Actions had consequences, and those consequences were affecting something people really cared about. Fans had to ask themselves, is this really what we signed up for? Can we separate the art from the artist, or is it time to close the portal on this dimension of entertainment? Alright, so we've covered the sauce debacle and the creator's drama. Now let's talk about the Rick and Morty fandom itself. The show's nihilistic themes struck a chord with some viewers, but not always in a good way. The Rick and Morty subreddit started as a place for fans to geek out, but it quickly turned into a toxic pressure cooker. Being a jerk became the cool thing to do. Fans thought acting like Rick made them smart, when it really just made them insufferable. One user had infamously posted, "If you don't understand quantum mechanics, you don't deserve to watch this show." Talk about missing the point. Gatekeeping became a major issue. New fans would show up excited to join the community, only to get mocked for not knowing every obscure reference. It was high school all over again, but with more interdimensional cable jokes. Female fans faced serious harassment. One Reddit thread about a woman cosplaying as Rick devolved into creepy comments and insults. It's like these toxic fans forgot that half the show's writers are women, or maybe they just didn't care. Remember that, to be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty copy pasta? It started as a joke, but some fans took it seriously. They really believed they were geniuses for getting the show, and anyone who criticized it just wasn't smart enough. The show tried to address this toxicity. There's even an episode where Rick and Morty separate from their toxic selves. But for many fans, the message went right over their heads. They were too busy quoting Rick's nihilistic one-liners to realize they were being called out. Why did Rick and Morty's nihilism hit so hard with certain fans? Maybe because the show came out when many people felt disillusioned. The economy was rough, politics were a mess, and here comes this show saying none of it matters. For some, that was freeing. For others, it became an excuse to be awful. Social media amplified the loudest, most extreme voices. While plenty of fans just enjoyed the show without drama, the ones screaming about Szechuan sauce and harassing people online got all the attention. It's like a perfect storm created this toxic fandom. You've got a smart, edgy show, passionate internet-savvy fans, and a cultural moment ripe for nihilism. Mix it all together and you get people acting like they're the Rickest Rick in a multiverse full of Jerrys. But what does this mean for Rick and Morty? The creators have tried to distance themselves from the toxic elements, but it's not simple. How do you keep making a show about cosmic insignificance when some fans use those ideas to justify being terrible people? It's a pickle that even Rick might have trouble getting out of. So, we've been on quite a journey with Rick and Morty, huh? From its humble beginnings to becoming a cultural juggernaut, this show has given us plenty to think about. It's become a mirror, reflecting some uncomfortable truths about fandom and media consumption. The future of Rick and Morty is anyone's guess, but here's a thought. The real power is in our hands, the viewers. We're like gardeners, nurturing the landscape of TV with our choices. How we engage with the show, treat other fans, and what we demand from our entertainment. That's what shapes not just Rick and Morty, but the whole media landscape. Remember that portal gun from episode 1? Maybe it's time we use it to explore our own role in this wild multiverse of media. Food for thought, right?